There are some rules. Like, for instance, as an Italian living in France, I've already seen people using their knife, to cut the spaghetti. That is like heretical. Like, if you do that as an Italian, you risk losing your passport. Literally.
Pane? Cut to. Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club. Day.
Night.
Action.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Restaurant Fiction. My name is Monis Rose. What is Restaurant Fiction? We are the show. We are the podcast that reviews fictional restaurants, bars, and clubs in TV and film. Today's fictional restaurant, bar, club is actually a scene, a very incredible, significant scene in all of Italian silent film. It is most notably by the most famous silent film actor in all of Italian cinema, and his name was Toto. And the movie, and I'm doing the American English pronunciations, called Misery and Nobility. And who are we bringing on? We are bringing on a French baker. Actually, he's an Italian who lives in France, who owns a slew of French bakeries. His name is Adriano Farano, and the slew of bakeries he owns is Pane Vivo, or Pane Vivo. I hope I am saying one of those correctly. I really tried. As a journalist, as a reporter, you want to establish credibility to say everything correctly. I really hope. But if I do mispronounce it, email me, monis@restaurantfiction.com, or put it in the comments. Want to hear from you. Anyway, why and how does Pane Vivo, all of Adriano's bakeries in France, stick out? Well, you're just going to have to listen. You're just going to have to watch to find out. You're going to have to listen and watch why he picked Toto and Misery and Nobility as his favorite pretty much fictional food scene. I mean, it is a pretty funny, a pretty hysterical spaghetti scene. I mean, yes, there are a lot of spaghetti, Italian, and meatballs scenes in the cinematic universe, but Toto just eats spaghetti like no one's business. Obviously you can get it hopefully at your local library, hopefully streaming on YouTube, wherever. But anyway, also, what's really incredible about the conversation we have with Adriano is how to stick out, how to not only find your niche, but capitalize it, to be the only one. That's right. That's all you got to do. You find your niche and you just put all of your cards down, put all of your coins down on that niche. You double down on your niche and you expand. And that's what he did to not only open one bakery, open many in, you would think, a city where a bread bakery is a dime a dozen. Anyway, here is our incredible conversation with Adriano. Our review of the spaghetti scene, Toto's spaghetti scene in Misery and Nobility. Check it out. Guys, gals, let me tell you something about pasta. Let me tell you something about spaghetti. You see, even if it doesn't matter if you are, say, a vagabond street urchin, if you will, it doesn't matter if you are high and mighty in the pay scale, you're going to want spaghetti. And you're not just going to want spaghetti. I mean, you want that pomodoro. You want the crushed Roma tomatoes with a masher or by hand, with a little infused olive oil, with a little garlic, with a little basil. You want that al dente spaghetti, that's not really, it has the semolina and the double O, but also It's very rich in egg yolk. And once you have this, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, once again, if you are, anything between the haves and the have-nots, because there's going to be a beast, and the beast is going to awaken, and it's going to drool, and you're just going to want to jump up on the table and just eat and gobble it up, because there's something universal about spaghetti when it is done right, when it is done so well. And I mean, you're not even going to want to wait for a doggy bag. You're going to want to put it in your pockets. You're going to want to just stuff it in for seconds later. Like that's really it, of when quality, when simplicity and quality intertwine and connect. It is the most beautiful thing, to where, once again, the haves and have-nots are on equal playing field. And now this is all taking place, once again, in Naples, Italy, by the way. And obviously, in Italy, it is said that Italian food is amazing. We're not going to argue there, but on this specific Neapolitan town within Naples, I mean, the spaghetti is just that good. And still in Naples, the bread is taken seriously. The bread is held in a baby carriage. It is treated like a baby, as quality bread should always be. So it doesn't matter whatever your last meal is, if it is, hop on the table and stuff pockets full of spaghetti, or if it is that loaf that you want to treat with so much TLC, you want to treat it like a newborn child. It doesn't matter. You're going to be, it's a win-win no matter what. All right, anyway, that is our little quick review of...
I love it.
Yeah, this is the 1954 Italian film, Pane Nobility, and it is starring the great Italian actor Toto. We are talking to French baker, amazing baker. Obviously, he is Italian, but his bakeries are all over Paris. Adriano Farano. Adriano, how was that review? What is your take on the spaghetti scene and a little bit of the bread, the majority spaghetti scene of the famous Toto film, Poverty and Nobility?
Well, first of all, I must say that what I just heard is the single best, ode to the greatness of spaghetti, because truth must be told, spaghetti is the toughest pasta type to bake, right? Because it's so thin, and so long, and the diameter is like almost nothing. Granted, it is not the thinnest. You also have capellini, which technically means small hair, but spaghetti comes from the word spago, the etymology. Now, that scene comes from the movie, as you said, Misery and Nobiltà, Misery and Nobility, featuring Toto. First of all, let me say something about Toto. Toto is probably the single most known Neapolitan actor, certainly one of the most famous Italian actors of the 20th century. Why was he so popular? Because he was able to, and the title of the movie, Miseria e Nobiltà, say it all, to really find a little bit, as you said, this leveling between social classes at a time when Italy was coming out of the World War II, and new rich people were emerging, but large swaths of the Napolitan society were still struggling with daily life. And so he would bring this joy and these characters and this irony with a lot of sarcasm, in order to both make fun of the new riches, and also play with that notion of scarcity that comes from poverty, by creating a lot of very hilarious scenes. So that when you ask me about like a restaurant, I was like, okay, that might not be a restaurant, but in a way it is, because by that time, like, people were eating everywhere, and sometimes they were not eating at all, and that's actually what's happening in the scene, because they haven't eaten for a few days. They are left alone in a room with this giant bowl of spaghetti, and they're looking at each other like, what are we gonna do? And they each get closer and closer and closer and closer to the spaghetti, until the point where they collapse and they're all almost swimming into them. And then you never know when it's gonna be the next time that you eat, so they start putting them into their pockets. It's just hilarious.
What is it about comedy, and obviously you could either say food or even more specific, what is it about comedy and spaghetti that goes so well together?
Right. I mean, you could argue even Western, like the spaghetti Western. You remember, like, I think that it's first of all, it's like, as I said, it's a dish that is hard to cook, but it's also a dish that is hard to eat, right? And there are some rules. Like, for instance, as an Italian living in France, I've already seen people using their knife, to cut the spaghetti. That is like heretical. Like, if you do that as an Italian, you risk losing your passport. Literally.
And it's one of those dishes that so many people, it doesn't matter if you're Italian, it doesn't matter if you're American, it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Japanese, it's just one of those meals that I feel is taken for granted. People in general think it's so simple.
There's a difference between easy and simple. Like, this is really a dish that is not easy to cook, not easy to eat, but it is simple. And the other side, like, there are a lot of things that can look easy, maybe are easy to make, but who are not simple. Like, most of the industrial food, or like when you order Uber Eats instead of cooking, okay, that is very easy, but it's not simple, because it's a lot of, like, you know. Ultra transformed food. There's a lot too much salt. There's too much spice. There's too much everything. Italian cuisine, especially what we call cucina povera, so poor cuisine, is actually an ode to simplicity, but the simpler, the harder to make. The simpler the food, the harder it is to make. At the end of the day, Italian cuisine, I think, is a lot comes back to the produce, really the quality of the produce that you use.
Misery and Nobility. Gotcha. So in Misery and Nobility, this movie is over 50 years old. Just so what still, when we asked you, yeah, what is your favorite food film? I mean, what makes this film resonate with you and create such an impact when it's, vintage, when it's classic?
Yeah, right. Because I think that it's one of these movies that every Italian knows about, especially this scene, because it's so hilarious, right? To see people putting spaghettis into their pockets. And it still resonates a lot with, although nowadays you don't see people anymore, wandering around, like, with all this hunger, right? But I think we live in a world where we do still have hunger for proximity, for intimacy, for getting closer to each other. Especially after the pandemic stroke, the fact of seeing a bunch of people eating in such a wild and almost Tarantino-esque way is, I think, something that still resonates with a lot of people. It does, certainly, for me.
And in this movie, for our audience, for the people who have not seen it or are not familiar with it, it is about, say, a group of people, including Toto, who um, are the have-nots of the street, and they're now
Right.
pretending to be noble. They're pretending to
Yes.
for money, for wealth, for actual physical abundance. So, um, if you could impersonate any famous person, Adriano, who would it be? So obviously you were like, hey, be a famous person for the day. Who is that famous person?
Well, I would love to do Indiana Jones. Yes, and discovering like an ancient grain, in a pharaoh's uh, place, just because I love history. I really do. I actually come from the place south of Naples that is very close to Pompeii, of course, which is one of the most beautiful archaeological sites. Yes.
Great segue. So you picked the ancient grain, and obviously you are a bread baker, bread baker chef in Paris. So what inspired your passion for bread of all the foods, even to the core of where that last answer to where you want to be Indiana Jones for the day, not to get some kind of jewel or art piece, but
Right.
to get a piece of grain to help
Yes.
with your knowledge and your TLC of the product that you make.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Well, I used to live in the US, actually, not in southern, but in northern California. I went there after a career in journalism, and then I kind of like switched gears, started like a tech startup company, sold that company, and by the time I became an employee, I had free weekends, and so I started baking and baking and baking and baking, and I had a lot of friends coming over, but California is full of like health aware people who would be like, oh, I'm gluten free, I cannot eat bread or I cannot eat the spaghetti. Like, okay, but why? Are you celiac? Do you have like celiac disease? No, no, it's just that gluten is pro-inflammatory. It's bad for your guts, for your microbiome. And I was like, really? I mean, we've been eating gluten-based food stuff for thousands of years, and not many people got sick, right? What happened? So what I understood was that starting at the beginning of the 20th century, we changed the DNA of wheat in order to grow wheat species that were just more productive, so that yields could be higher and price, like bread price and the pasta price, could go down. But by doing so, we didn't realize how bad, how sticky that gluten would become. So sticky that nowadays you can argue that, and there are actually like lots of like scientists, especially at Harvard Medical School, who have showed how pro-inflammatory that is. And inflammation means that basically your body cells just go crazy with all these attacks that are conveyed to them. What that means, to give you an example, is that so first of all, when you eat bread nowadays, most bread, you really have like all these chain reactions of inflammation that by inflammating the gut can get to inflammate your brain. And that's the real problem, because most neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer, Parkinson, and so on, of course, can have like a genetic origin, but the growth that we see cannot just be genetic, because genetics doesn't change that often and that much. There must be also a link with food. Okay, there is a great book called Brain Grain, written by the doctor Perlmutter, that actually shows that connection. So that's the first problem, gluten. The second problem is the glucose levels, because when you eat whole wheat bread, I'm not even talking about white bread, Maurice. actually you get sugar levels in your blood that are higher than when you drink Coca-Cola, which is completely mind-blowing. So when I saw all of that with all my love for Italian food, my wife who's French, our culture, so if you take me out of my life, if you take out gluten, it's like if you get like a lung out of my body. Like I cannot eat gluten free, it's not possible. And so I was like, okay, wait a second, we've been eating bread and pasta for 10,000 years and nobody got sick. What happened? So once I understood all this, I was like, okay, I need to find like a real gluten. We need to go back to a real type of wheat that is easy to digest, that doesn't give you sugar spike, that can actually get this role of a healthy staple food back. And so I found this wheat. And this wheat is called Russello. So it's a type of wheat that comes from Sicily. What is very interesting is that you know the French, right? French are usually, they love their country. But, this researcher, despite being French, she was like, wait a second, I may very well test French wheat, but French wheat is not real wheat, it's soft wheat. The real wheat is durum wheat, okay? And durum wheat is very different from soft wheat for a variety of reasons. The most funny one is what you can see here is like a mustache. You know? that mustache is what makes the durum, because durum means tough. Okay, so and because that mustache is actually like a shell, is the end of a very long shell that protects the wheat grain. And by protecting the wheat grain, it helps it keep in a steadier way all the vitamins, all the proteins. And by being a very tall plant, you can see that this one was cut, but it's already quite tall, Um, I don't know if you see Van Gogh's paintings, but in Van Gogh's paintings, Vincent van Gogh's, the famous Dutch painter, you have wheat that are almost the size of a human being. And those are the old wheats, the old grains. So what I did was to use modern science to really decipher and understand all the benefits of the ancient grains, and out of thousands of varieties, pick the one, which is this one called Russello, whose gluten was easiest to digest, whose starch and carbs were the ones who would give you the fewer chances of developing overweight issues or diabetes and so on. And guess what? The bread that we make with this wheat contains as much iron as red meat. So it's a superfood. And that is why I was able to come to Paris as an Italian and sell bread to the French, which is almost like saying go to the North Pole and sell snow to the Eskimos, right?
That was educational, inspirational, and entertaining. All three aspects of what hopefully we always get when we listen to restaurant fiction. Hopefully, when you always listen and watch restaurant fiction. You are welcome back any and every time. For those who want to know more about Adriano, go to Paris. I mean, that's the best. That is the best. Oh, and by the way, this interview was actually done virtually, and he was in Paris. So I mean, it was our first international podcast episode, which we absolutely loved. I mean, honestly, if there is a fictional restaurant bar and club in any type of television or film, it doesn't matter if it's American, if it's Italian, if it's the Japanese, Chinese. I mean, hey, if you are a part of this, we're going to have you on. That's just what Restaurant Fiction is about. But anyway, back to Adriano. Visit Pane Vivo when you are in Paris. I mean, you don't need an excuse to go to Paris, but now you got one. And you just don't go to his bakeries once or twice. I mean, you go many times. And if you spend a week or two or more in Paris, I believe his place, or I believe just get a delivery service to deliver his bread to you wherever you're staying, day in, day out. I mean, your body, your soul, your brain, everything about you will thank you for it. You found Restaurant Fiction. Best what you could do is always like and subscribe to us. Say a comment below or personally email me, monis@restaurantfiction.com. If you are in the Los Angeles area on October 6th, please say hi. We are going to be at Los Angeles Comic Con. We are doing a live panel, so be on the lookout. You know, obviously you can buy your toys or your toy drops, kind of the same thing. Buy your comic books and then say hi. Or if you are in New York, we are going to be at New York Comic Con on October 20th. So say hi to me then too. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. It's going to be fucking fantastic. But yes, I am Monis. You are listening to Restaurant Fiction. Thank you as always. Keep it real, keep it fresh, and keep it on the flip side.